Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to the ones who are joining us from UK. Development at any phase is always linked with technology, and technology happens when there is advancement in science. Science encompasses the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world to observation and experiment. And technology is the application of scientific knowledge for practical purpose. Science and technology has made life a lot easier and a lot better. Modernization in every aspect of life is the greatest example of the implementation of science and technology in every nation. With the introduction of modern gadgets in every walk of life, life has become simple, and this is possible only because of implementing science and technology together. In this regard, the Department of Electronics of DVS College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Shivamogga organizes one-day international webinar on evolution of science and technology under the Aegis of IQAC of the college. And for today's webinar, we have our proud alumni, Mr. Ranganath, founder and CEO of Chiplogic, UK, as a distinguished speaker about the evolution of science and technology. For this program, now I request Ms. Anusha HS, Assistant Professor of Electronics, to welcome you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are organizing a one-day international webinar on evolution of science and technology. It's my immense bliss to be in front of you to deliver this welcome speech. Firstly, I would like to welcome our respected principal, Dr. H.T. Krishnamurthy sir, to this webinar. I welcome you, sir. Our DVS management has been the greatest support to all the curricular activities in our college. We are honored to have S. Rajashekar sir, Secretary of DVS Management. I welcome you, sir. I would like to welcome Dr. H.V. Anil Kumar sir, IQAC Coordinator of the DVS College, to this webinar. I would like to welcome Professor S.V. Umesh, Head of the Department of Electronics, to this webinar. I welcome you, sir. We are proud to have Mr. Ranganath, founder and CEO of Chiplogic, UK, the alumni of Electronics Department, who is the speaker for today's webinar. I welcome you, sir. I wholeheartedly welcome all the participants who are present here to attend this webinar. I welcome you all. I hope you will have a great session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anusha ma'am, for welcoming the gathering. And now we have dynamic personality of our DVS management, Shri S. Rajashekar sir, today in this webinar. So I request Rajashekar sir to speak a few words about this webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Over the years, technology has revolutionized our world and daily lives. Technology has created amazing tools making useful information available at our fingertips. Technology has also made our lives easier and faster. It gives me an immense pleasure to be a part of this one-day international webinar on evolution and science and technology hosted by the Electronics Department of DVS College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Shivamogga. On behalf of DVS management, I wish them all the success for today's webinar and hope all the participants will have an informative session today. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your valuable words, sir. Whatever the college activities are happening, DVS management has always been a greatest support, and that is why we have waited so long for his valuable words. And thank you for addressing the gathering, sir. Now I request Professor Umesh sir to introduce the eminent speaker of today's session. Over to you, sir.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege to introduce our speaker for today's one-day international webinar on evolution of science and technology, Mr. Ranganath K. Ranganath was born 4th May 1975 in Kempanahalli to Shekharappa and Annapurnamma. Ranganath completed his graduation in electronics discipline from DVS College of Arts and Science, Shivamogga, in the year 1996. Later, he completed his master in electronics from Mangalore University and then did MBA from Cranfield School of Management in UK in finance and entrepreneurship after few years of experience. Ranganath has over 20 years of experience in the semiconductor industry as a technical lead, verification consultant, business development manager, and has held several engineering and management positions at both product and service companies. A hands-on engineer worked on and deployed advanced verification solutions for complex verifications projects for several global companies in USA, Europe, and in India. He is currently the founder and CEO of Chiplogic, an aluminum and semiconductor company. Prior to founding Chiplogic, he was the founder and CEO of Elite Plus Semiconductor Technologies, which was acquired by Moschip in late 2016. And as a part of acquisition, he worked as Senior Vice President at Moschip. Before this, he was the Director of Engineering at Encirca, responsible for leading verification engineering and services business, and has helped them to set up an overseas design center in India. It is truly an honor to have the alumni of our college, Mr. Ranganath, as the speaker for today's one-day international webinar organized by the Department of Electronics.
And now, I hand over the session to the speaker of the day, Mr. Ranganath K.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. It looks like we're already late. Let's get started. So I'm here to talk about the evolution of science and technology with a particular focus on semiconductor and artificial intelligence. As you can see, this is a bit of an open-ended topic. It could go on for hours and days. Right? So what I'll do is I'll try to see. I'll try to give you a best overview of what has happened in the semiconductor industry and what's going to happen in the artificial intelligence area. Okay, so just to set the scene, let's go back into the history and see the first industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution, don't we call it as a technical revolution? It's more of a mechanical one. And it started in the journey kind of started in years 1700. And we started with this invention called steam engine. We call this as a Watt steam engine. This had two key innovations. One, it had a condenser, with which you can save the power, and then the output was in terms of the rotary motion, which you could use for a lot of things. And this really did the trick, and from there we went crazy and did quite a lot of things. Right? And in those days, it was very, the change was not accepted as easy as nowadays. From the time they conceived this idea to the actual mass production, it took years to actually used in the sort of end applications. So in the next, fast forward next like 250 years, there has been a lot of innovations based on this, and we sort of moved on from electronics to electrical and electrical to more of an electronics, right? So the subject that is of interest for all of us is and we have also witnessed in the last 25-30 years is a digital revolution, right? That's what that's what is of more interest of all of us. And this happened in the last 25 to 30 years with the invention of computer and mobile technology, and also in terms of the communications, we have kind of increased the speed of communication. Started with 1G, and we are currently heading towards 4G and 5G in terms of the communications. And likes of internet, the real social media, what we call Facebook and WhatsApp. So, I particularly think that the great advancement happened in terms of the communication. If you look, I'm sure most of you are millennials, and you probably doesn't know much about the the whole way of communication. Earlier communications, we used to have this phone setup, which we used to call it as a TP call, which is a personal phone call. And when the way it used to work is, you have to make a call to the exchange, and in the exchange, an operator would actually, note your number and then make a connection to the other party. If you're lucky, you could get this connection done within 1 hour, or sometimes even it takes a days to get the call done. So from there, we moved on to in terms of the communication. So there has been a lot of advancements, both in terms of the wired communications, wireless communications, one-to-one communications, and one-to-many communications. And nowadays, everything happens in the click of a button, right? And you could get connected to, as quickly as possible, and at the same time, and in terms of the communication as well, the actual carrying itself has moved on from signal to data. Nowadays, most of the communication that happens is in terms of the data packets rather than just the signal alone, right? So you can even make a video calls, on the press of the button, right? So that's the kind of great advancement that has happened. Still, if you look at all of this communication, what we are talking about here is human-to-human communication, right? So the next big thing that everybody talks about is not just only human-to-human communication, but also human-to-device, device-to-humans, and device-to-device, right? This is what we call it as a Internet of Things. In fact, people call it as Internet of Everything. That you could connect anything and everything on the planet. Okay. So there is an expectation that by 2025 there are about 64 billion IoT devices will be connected worldwide. So you just imagine, when those many devices are connected, one thing that happens is it creates lots of data. Right? Each one of us, when we communicate, when we exchange, there's a lot of data that we exchange, right? It's in gigabytes and terabytes, research. So basically, when we have this Internet of Things and when everything is connected, so there is a mountain load of data that is being generated. So under this data, there is some useful nuggets of information, right? Because all this data is not just the data that we communicate. There is some useful information that is embedded within this data, right? So what we need to do is, to extract the information, you need to mine this data and hopefully process it as well. So this is what we call it as a big data technology that everybody talks about it. Right? So there is a huge number of there's quite a lot of algorithms being developed to extract this data, and also there's a whole lot of data science that goes into process this data. So if you are careful enough, in terms of the processing and mining the data, you could identify some useful patterns, and these patterns are very, very extremely useful to predict something. So let's say if it is in the field of medical, right? You could predict something, and then where you can, if not avoidant, you can at least prevent some medical conditions, and hopefully have some vaccinations as well by predicting this is what may come in, and we might be able to avoid the future pandemic, if we can collect the data properly. And of course, by looking at the existing patterns, and we'll have hopefully we'll have solutions for some of these terminal illness that what we are talking about. And similarly, if the data is related to financial side, we can have a better regulations, right? And then hopefully we'll take good governance around that, and then control the frauds that are happening in the banking sector. And if it is a retail side, we can maintain the balance between the production and the consumption, so thereby reducing the waste, right? So we're talking about all these technological evolutions, all this is possible. So what exactly made this all this possible? So the one thing that I belongs to, the semiconductor industry, the great innovation which happened in year 1947 was transistor. Right? Transistor is like a switch. Right? It's an active component that we call it as, and it acts like a switch, kind of holds information of ones and zeros. Right? So just like the way our body is made up of cells, the electronics devices electronic circuits are made up of billions of transistors. So the whole devices that we are talking about here, they are nothing but a package of transistors, right? So, I mean, what exactly triggered the concept of a transistor? So, prior to transistor, we had this things called vacuum tubes. They are really bulky, right? So, which are the concept of the electrons moving from one side to another side, where you could control the flow and where you can actually take the curves into a different direction, which can be used for many applications. That is what has triggered the the concept of invention for transistor. So, I mean, if you just to give a context, first electronic computer, which we call it as more of a calculator, not even a computer, right? Where you can do some level of computing. It took, which we call it as an ENIAC, right? An electronic numerical and calculator, which took around 18,000 vacuum tubes, the tubes that I was talking about here, and then about 8,000 crystal diodes, right? And this calculator was about the size of a big all that you can imagine, right? All you could do is just a little bit of calculations, right? So from there, we developed the concept of transistor, and then things have sort of moved on, from then on, and so nowadays, transistors are kind of replaced everything, and that's what the definition of the semiconductor electronics sort of began in year 47. But actually, in the year 57 is where the two gentlemen who invented the transistor from the Bell Laboratory got the Nobel Prize as well for their innovation. Right. So the semiconductor industry that I've been involved for the last 75 years, what we have been doing is we have been packing more and more transistor into what we call it as an integrated chips. Right. That's what we've been working on, and so depending on the amount of packaging, amount of transistors that we pack into, so we call that into small scale integration circuits, large scale integration circuits, and very large scale integration circuits. And in fact, people have come up with a new definitions called ultra large scale integrated chips as well. So this is a kind of advancement that has happened, in the transistors, making into the chip. So in year 57, the founder, the co-founder and the CEO of Intel, Mr. Gordon Moore, right? So he came up with this prediction because, as I said, ever since in 1947 we started, with the transistor, we've been trying to kind of reduce the area, right? Constantly packing more and more transistors into. So he came up with this law saying that, every year in the same dense, right, in the same, the die size, we would be packing double the transistor in about 2 years. Right? So that's sort of the prediction that they came out, and that sort of holds good now as well. So it's not a law of physics; it's more like an empirical relationship that based on the observations and the experience that he has gained. So that the Moore's law still holds good. So since 1957, we've been kind of packing as many transistors as possible into the chip. Okay. So in the last 20 years that I've been involved with this semiconductor industry, when I started, we worked on 160 nanometer technology. When we talk about the technology, it's about how you pack the transistor, how you kind of put the transistor in a meaningful way onto the wafer and to the die size. That's what the technology is about. So we started, when I started my career, it's about 160 nanometer technology is what we were using. And from there we moved on to 80 nanometer, 60 nanometer, 22 nanometer is the last couple of years that have happened. And people have already moved on to 14 nanometers and then taping out the chips, and making the chips already available. And then now people are already moving towards 7 nanometer and 4 nanometer technology. I'll show you a video at some stage, what I'm talking about, these technologies is about, right? So if you have seen a transistor, what happens in the lower nodes, especially when it goes to 14 nanometers, 7 nanometers, and 4 nanometers. See, the traditional transistor that you probably have seen, the bipolar junction transistor, the MOSFETs, doesn't fit anymore, right? So since we have, sort of thinned down so much, the very essential of tunneling, the tunneling is a concept that we use in physics, where the flow of electron moves from one side to another side. That's what is called as a tunneling. Even tunneling cannot happen. Even the electrons cannot move from a source to drain. That's the way that's the amount of challenge that the industry has accepted, and that's how they have been thinning down. Right. So what you have to do is, in between the source and the drain, there is something called as a base, which basically helps to electron to control in the active part that I mentioned. Right? So they literally, because the electrons are not able to move from source to drain in the lower technology, they have to literally create a bump in the base. Right? So this technology is called as a FinFET technology, and if any of you wants to do a lot of research and wants to work in this kind of industry, this is an area that there is a huge demand. There is a lot of opportunities in this area if you would like to carve out your career. So I mean, you could ask, you're being a semiconductor professional, are you really packing all these transistors into the chip? Is that what you do on a day-to-day basis? Yes and no. The reason is, there are two aspects in the semiconductor design cycle. One, there's the science aspects of it, which is what we call it as about making the transistors and putting it on the chip. And the second thing is the engineering aspects of it. Actually, the engineering aspects comes first. Okay, and the science aspect actually comes later, but we need to have these libraries in place. Okay, so what we do when we talk about engineering aspects, is basically we play in the world of simulation. We simulate all the the IC requirements. We call it as an application-specific integrated chips into a world of simulation. We define that into some sort of a schematic, some sort of an hardware description language, and then we synthesize and give it to the foundry, and then foundry will actually do the masking. Right? So how does it all start? If you look at go back in the past days, what we used to do all these schematics on a drawing board. You would define the batteries, you define all the circuits, and how the output should come. And it was okay for a relatively simple circuit. But then things really started getting complicated. We started putting more and more transistors, more and more devices, and it was becoming very, very cumbersome. Then what people did, and again in the Bell Labs and likes of some of these famous institutes, while they're writing on the paper, they started putting some conditions. Right? Okay, if I enable this transistor, what would happen? If I disable this one, what would happen? Right? And those enable conditions also trigger the thought of putting that into some sort of a lexical convention. Right? At the same time, the C language, you must have heard, which was up to in the and C language was becoming more popular in terms of modeling the systems software. Right? So they started coming up with some sort of a specific language to describe these hardware, and that is what we call as HDL, hardware description language, where we define the hardware in sort of a lexical convention in an array level language we call it as HDL language. So there are two popular the languages which we have today, the VHDL and Verilog for design. And obviously, when you do a design, you have to verify to make sure that it really works correctly. And for that, there are a lot of object-oriented languages, which we call it as an hardware verification languages. So again, if you want to move into the semiconductor industry, if you are looking to carve out your the prospects, so most of the jobs will be in this area, right? Writing the code in VHDL, Verilog. And then, of course, we have this advanced concept called system Verilog and some methodologies like UVM, DMM, etc. Right? So when the tools and the methodologies that I mentioned are so powerful these days. If you just define a couple of lines of these VHDL and Verilog code, it will create millions of gates. Just a couple of lines of codes will represent millions of gates. Obviously, you put them in some sort of an order, and that eventually will become a transistors, right? So I really want to show you how the chip being made, from a sand to the silicon, to actually how that is mounted, right? And I want to show a small video from Intel. It's just a 2-minute video. Mr. Jagdish, would you mind just playing that video for me? Thank you very much, Jagdish. So, yeah, you're seeing there, right, how the sand being taken out into a silicon, made into silicon, and how that silicon has been sliced into many pieces, and what we call it as a wafer. Okay, and once a wafer is created, right, how those wafers has been, particularly etched for what we call it as etching process, right? Etched for transistor. And also we have seen how the chips being made, right? So the billions of transistors and the circuits being put into a single chip. Right? So this single chip, what we call it as a processor. So they're extremely powerful. They can compute quite a lot of applications for you. It can process both system and applications data together. All the applications that we can talk about, the entire mobile applications can be put into a single chip, right? And either it is for the mobile applications or for the enterprise applications. There is big kind of data being processed on a single chip, right? So it's not just only a data when you talk about application data. We're also talking about audio streams, video streams. Right? So we have seen the powerful of these chips. You have seen Mr. Rajamouli in Bahubali movie. He created this entire Mahishmati kingdom by using a couple of processors, by using AMD processor, that was told. So it's extremely powerful. I mean, with just a couple of processors, what you can do in terms of the computing power and the speed. So one of the things that has changed over a period of time, is architecture in the way you define the chips, right? So I mean, probably most of you, what you have seen in the the processor, the 8085 processor, what you have is follows Van Neumann architecture. So the Van Neumann architecture is more like you have a you have all the control, the actual processor, and then there is a memory, and the processor and the memory is communicated through a bus, right? So the information is always stored in the memory, whether it's a system information or it's application information, it's always stored in the memory. That's what is the driven, the Van Neumann architectures are driven. And then they decided, okay, it's going to be very cumbersome. The accessing speed is some of the things that they wanted to address. The Harvard architecture is more where they separated the system memory and the and the application memory. So that's where you probably must have seen that there are some system RAMs, system ROMs, and then also the applications memory can be put that as an external sockets or in SSD drives, right? So, and taking this further, because we are all kind of moving into the world of artificial intelligence, right? So driven by the concept of neurons, where it holds the information and also it has got a very very sort of it's not just only hold the information but also kind of carries quite a bit of information as well. So it kind of inspired by that neuron architecture, now we are moving into what we call it as a neuromorphic computing architecture, where the information, the storage, and the processing happens at the same place. Okay, this is a very quite complicated architecture. So that's something that where people are heading towards, and and also the nodes that I talked about in expansion, the 4 nanometer technology and the lower technical nodes that we spoke about, is really helping to advance in that direction. And one of the big challenge, I would say, in the world of computing at this stage is not just the speed, not just the process, it's about access time. Okay, when we say an access time, how quickly the data being accessed from the memory. That's one of the biggest challenge that we are all trying to address. So for that, they realize that the usual memory techniques is not going to work, and people are moving into what we call as a quantum computing, the qubits, where the information is stored in terms of the 2 bits, which can take like 2 to the 4 or 3 combinations. So this is a really the wonderful concept which is being a lot of research working on the quantum computing, and hopefully that will increase the speed even more. Right? So in a computer system, when you look at a computer system consists of an hardware and the software and the applications, you always think that hardware is a place where all the software runs, and at the same time, hardware is what brings the speed. Right? So the application software and the system software, that is basically to execute the instructions that are required for you to run the applications. And you can look at all these application software, the apps, they are more of a cosmetic things. The actual process happens in the hardware. So that hardware, is what we are talking about, the chips, and that is predominantly driven from the transistor technology. Right? We are able to do a lot of these processes to as number of the transistors into this one because of the evolution that has happened in the last 60, 70 years. Right? So transistor is not the only thing that has happened in the last 60, 70 years, but particularly in the last 30, 40 years, there has been a lot happening in the area of artificial intelligence. Right? The machines are trying to run on their own. So just to give you a bit of a background, artificial intelligence, the concept of artificial intelligence has been around for quite some time now. The earlier system in the 60s, 70s, we used to call it as an expert system. It's more like a flowchart based one, where a real-time expert would define, okay, if this is a condition, this is what you need to do, and very, very, very simple things, but embodied with the real-time expertise involved in it. Right? So the movement, the leadership movement, that what we call it as, happened in 1996, on the year that I was graduated. So IBM created this computer called Blue Computer, which is the first computer they called it for a gaming application. Sorry, not for gaming applications, for slightly gaming applications to come to some computations, right? And in '96, it beat the the then chess champion Garry Kasparov in the chess game. Okay, so this happened in about 1996. Prior to that, the IBM guys, they took at least 3 years to make that computer, with all the combinations that are possible, so that it can go and then it can predict the moves of what Garry Kasparov would do, and then play against him. So in 1996, it won against this Garry Kasparov. That's like one of the key defining moments for the artificial intelligence. And again, people started questioning, right? So the chess is all about statistics and mathematics, right? So computers are supposed to be good at computing, right? So what's a big deal about? What's a big deal about it, right? So then again, fast forward another 10, 15 years, IBM came out with another computer called Watson. It's another huge system that they created. So Watson is not just only for the computing purpose; it was also able to process the natural language processing. Right? In 2011, Watson, it was used in the first time it was used in a quiz game show called Jeopardy, and it won $1 billion against the then quiz champions. So that really sort of put the artificial intelligence to the next level. And then in 2013, not long ago, first time the AI machine, the Watson, has been used for real applications, for one of the lung cancer applications, to do some utility management decisions. So this really did the trick for us to get going with the artificial intelligence. And since then, we have been doing quite a lot. We are able to, what we call it as a convolutional neural network. We have understood the way the new neuron works, and we started applying that the neuron techniques into the machine to see that how this can be, improved in the area of artificial intelligence. So the machine started learning. We call this process as a training. Basically, you have to train a certain set of data to make sure the machines will learn from it. And it creates its own inference, right? So there's a lot been happening. If you can see the image on the screen, this is not the real people. These images are actually created by the artificial intelligence machine. It's not a morphing. It's like based on the data. What it does is, okay, this is how the face could be predicted. This is how the the nose, the features could be predicted. And that's how we are currently able to create some, what we call it as a synthetic data. It's basically a data which is very close to the real applications. The company that I'm involved in, so we are trying to see it to the next level. So we are coming out with this framework called Wizard. It's a video synthesis and real-time dynamics. So the aim of the game is to, you tell me a story, right? You give a storyboard, and we should be able to create a video out of it. By looking at the story, a text-based story, we can create a video out of it. So thereby what it does is it creates a synthetic data, and it accumulates all that synthetic data into a video function. It hopefully puts a proper video there. So I mean, the artificial intelligence and the ML things are really advancing quite a bit. So if you look at in terms of the theory of evolution, right, and how the man become a man from a monkey, right? So where are we today in terms of the artificial intelligence? We are somewhere between a monkey and chimpanzee, I would say. We are not there yet to take over the human, human mind, right? So we are progressing very fast, but not there yet. But very soon we will reach there. If not in our lifetime, so I guess maybe in our kids' lifetime, this artificial intelligence will definitely take over the human beings. Okay. So in summary, so I mean, semiconductor artificial intelligence is not the only thing that's happening. There are a lot of other things are happening. So one of the thing that is related to this one, which I just want to touch upon, is sensors. Right? We are making quite a lot of sensor applications as we speak. These sensors could, identify smells, see the dust particles, very, and can see the moisture levels in your eyes. It's a very, powerful sensors we are creating. And at the same time, as we spoke about the big data and the processor, so these processor, the big data and the artificial intelligence, this is being processed somewhere else. These are like actually physical machines, right? We call it as a cloud computing, but actually there are some physical machines which are sitting in the cloud, which will do all the brain work, right? And we are also creating a lot of robotic things, right? Not necessarily humanoid things, but also, everything from vacuum cleaner to drones, right? So we have been creating a lot of those things. So if you combine this together, right? The sensors being eyes and ears of a human, and this cloud data computing, is a brain, and all these, the robotic stuff that we talk about, body, legs, and arms. You can imagine that in the years to come, these can easily replace human beings, right? So, but there is a strong warning. Though all this looks very nice, as long as we use it for the right application, it should be fine. So as long as we use this technology to, we control the technology. As long as technology is not controlling us, I think this will be a wonderful thing that we could expect, in the years to come. So with that note, I thank you very much for this opportunity. So over to you guys if you want to ask any questions.
That was indeed a great session, sir. And now it's time for Q&A. So now it's Q&A session. So the participants, if you have any queries, please do ask questions here. Yeah, you're audible. You can ask questions.
Sir has told that integrated circuits in semiconductors, that's all. What the actually upgraded version or what he was having to tell us, I can't understand that one. He told it the applications of it and some other, but I have to ask that from this what he has to do now from this applications or how it was working, I am asking.
I didn't completely understood the question. Is she asking what are the applications of the integrated chips or how that is being done? I'm sorry, I didn't follow it properly. Would you mind?
So apart from this,
go ahead, Deepika.
Sir, apart from this, you have told so many things, I have understood, but apart from this, if any upgradation in this can help us in so many applications, right?
Yeah. See, the applications are humongous, right? So, as I said, there are custom-made integrated chips. Like, let's say you have a 555 timer or a keyboard interface, the processors. These are what we call it as a generic, ICs, right? Integrated chips that we use for many applications. But also, we are creating quite a lot of application-specific integrated chips. Let's say if you want to use it for the mobile applications, right? So there are ASICs, application-specific integrated chips made for the mobile chips. And if you want it for, television applications, there are some custom-made, ASICs being done as well. So it's the sky is the limit, in terms of what are the places that you can use, these integrated chips, right? In fact, companies like Facebook, Google, they are trying to come up with their own chips, right? Especially on the processor side, because if you look at the Intel processor or AMD processor or NVIDIA processors, what they do is they have a very generic purpose instructions, right? They can do anything. The way the processors are done is for everything and anything. Right? So whereas the Facebooks and the Google, they only want to use that applications for search engines. Right? So the way that you can use those by reducing the instruction set and then focusing on particular applications, thereby you free up some of the memory spaces and can crunch the data quite fast. So I mean, people are creating even the application-specific processors, right? As well. So again, as I said, the sky is the limit. You can use it for anything and everything, and as I said, hardware is just for speed, and wherever you want speed, speed is what your criteria is. Then you go for chips. That's what people do. I hope I answered your question, Deepika.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is Datta.
So I guess somebody also asked me a question about it is application of lung cancer out, right? So basically, what happens is they look at I guess this is not on the chip industry. It's on the artificial intelligence and machine learning. As I said, we process the data based on the previous data that is accumulated, right? So what they do is they look at the previous lung cancer patients, what has been done, what is the process of these, the cancer has been, and how that has been cured, and what is the sort of trends in how they get into the lung cancer, right? Plus, what kind of medicines and the effect works on certain parts. So they keep track of all these data, right? And then look at these data into a permutation and combinations. And then they predict, okay, so far certain these patients with these are the things, this is what has happened and this is what has worked. So they kind of come up with these algorithms, and that they process on this, the computer that I was talking about, and they come out with a best possible solution. So rather than, a patient going into an hospital and then trying to understand, they keep monitoring for the next 6 months, 8 months, right? And then trying to come out with a particular medicine for them, targeted medicine for them. So you can probably see the history and what has happened with other people. It's something like you learning from others' mistake, right? You learning from others, the doubt that's been treated. So that's the way it's treated.
Okay, Mr. Datta, you can ask the question. Datta?
Yeah, I think somebody asked me a very beautiful question, a wonderful question. Satish Chandra says, what if AI starts to control humans? How will we humans face it? That's a wonderful question. That is not just only a question, Mr. Satish, it's also a responsibility, right? As I said in the warning note, as long as we control the system and the AI, we should be okay, right? But if the AI starts controlling, yes, there is a potential danger. It happened in the past as well. I mean, if you look at when the bomb was first invented, it was not invented to kill human beings, right? It was supposed to be for breaking the barriers or right? But minus that, we are using for everything else. Now the bombs are used for threatening and destroying the whole thing, right? Similarly, if you look at the mobile, right? The mobile was supposed to be used for communication, but nowadays, we have addicted so much that the mobile has kind of taken over. If we do not have the mobile, we cannot live. So yeah, I mean, this technology does create some dependencies and the bad things. So it's all about how we control it. Yeah. So as I said, it is not just only the technologies, how you use it. It's also a responsibility how we use it.
So for now, we have ended the Q&A session. If you have any queries, we'll drop the email ID of Ranganath sir in the WhatsApp group as well as in the chat box now. You can contact him through the Gmail. Sir, indeed it was a great session. Thank you so much for being with us. And now, I welcome.
Hello, ma'am.
Okay, who is this?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there's one more question being asked on the chat board. I'll just try to answer that. So I think somebody is asking, what is your opinion on Neuralink, right? I mean, Neuralink is some of the, as I said, the neuromorphic architecture, right? we are trying to emulate the brain, the neurons, right? So the whole the concept of convolutional neural network and trying to remake the whole thing. There's a lot of research work being done. There are a lot of great algorithms being developed as we speak. In fact, one of the things that I forgot to mention is if you are good in mathematics and if you guys want to really enhance your skills, want to spend in the AI, there are a lot of opportunities for the mathematicians because the AI companies are really looking for the mathematicians to solve some of these computations and combinations. Okay. So yeah, Neuralink. Yes, of course. This is a subject under discussion. There's a lot of work being done as we speak. So yes, it is one of the things that what is going to be defining the artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Thank you for answering the query, sir. Now we have a principal, Dr. H.T. Krishnamurthy, sir, online. So I would like to request Principal, sir, to speak a few words about the webinar.
For beloved secretary and dignitaries, very good afternoon to one and all. I am very much happy to share few words and in this moments on the international webinar on the evolution of science and technology, organized by the Department of Electronics and guidance by the IQAC of our college. In fact, this is the third such international webinar put on platform in past 3 months, successfully followed after the Department of Botany, Zoology of this college. I am very much thankful to our today's dignitary and resource person and our alumni also, Ranganath, founder and CEO of Chiplogic company, UK. And I am thankful to Department of Electronics, SD Umesh and Anusha, and all the dignitaries. Thank you one and all. I think that this webinar is successfully going to end. Thank you one and all.
Now I would like to request Umesh, sir, to propose the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I feel honored and lucky to have this opportunity to propose vote of thanks for one-day international webinar on evolution of science and technology. It was a great pleasure to have the alumni of our college, Mr. Ranganath, as the distinguished speaker of today's webinar. On behalf of DVS management, principal, staff, and students, I extended my heartfelt thanks to him. I would like to thank our DVS management for their constant support for all the activities of the college, and special thanks to the Secretary Rashekar sir for addressing today's webinar. I thank our respected principal, Dr. H.T. Krishnamurthy sir, for his presence and guidance regarding this webinar. I wholeheartedly thank IQAC coordinator and ICT coordinator and their technical team, Dr. Jagdish A.S., Megharaj, Sangeeta, and Akshay Prabhu, for giving us the technical assistance. I thank the non-teaching faculties of the college who helped us in various ways in arranging this webinar. Lastly, I thank all the participants of the webinar whose activities participation made this webinar a successful one. Thank you one and all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Umesh sir, for proposing the vote of thanks. Indeed, it was a great session. And now the question is about the feedback link. The feedback link will be sent very soon in the WhatsApp groups, and also email ID of the speaker will also be sent in the WhatsApp group. If you have any queries, please drop your messages for the email ID dvs.umesh@gmail.com. We'll drop this email ID in the chat box now. So let not technology take over the humans. And thank you, I thank all the participants wholeheartedly for being a part of this wonderful webinar. And once again, thank you, Ranganath sir, for being a part of this. Indeed, you are really the proud alumni of our college, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the kind words and in giving this opportunity to speak to these youngsters. And of course, I think there is a few more questions being asked, and I hope that some of the questions are a little bit of social responsibility as well. What I would say is, as somebody suggested, I will give my email ID. Please send your questions to the email ID, and I will respond back in good time. Right? Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best. And take care.
Thank you, sir. So hereby we are ending the meeting. So for more queries, please contact the email ID given there. Thank you, one and all.